The Tunnels of Pueblo, a presentation by Gregory Howell. Today we'll be covering the following subjects: underground fascination, a town called town, empire builders, banks, brothels, and bars, oh my, prohibition, the tunnel legacy, 4,000 in 4 nights, and the future of the past. Underground fascination. Why are we drawn to tunnels and the underground? One of the entrances to the Cleves Cove cave system in Scotland, known as the Elfham, on occasion possible tunnels proved to be of purely natural origin, such as Cleves Cove Cave in Scotland or Kent's Cavern in England. The site at Cleves Cove Cave was previously known as the Elf House or Elfham, the locals at that time believing that elves had made it their abode. Here we have one of the entrances to the Cleves Cove cave system in Scotland, known as the Elfham. Rarely, natural caves or tunnel systems can be of great extent. The cave system with the greatest total length of passage is Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, at 367 miles in length, whilst the next most extensive known cave is Jewel Cave near Custer, South Dakota, at 140 miles. This is the Ice House entrance in Eglinton Country Park. Bruce Walker, an expert on Scottish vernacular architecture, has suggested that the relatively numerous and usually long-ruined ice houses on country estates may have led to Scotland's many tunnel legends. The appearance of ice house entrances could have prompted the uninitiated to make such deductions, since ice houses are often inconspicuously located in such places as the haha walls, house and stable basements, woodland banks, and open fields. If we take Paris, France as an example, we can better understand the fascination with the underground and tunnels. The catacombs of Paris. Some of the most amazing features of the catacombs of Paris include: 1. The limestone quarries were used as a natural resource since the time of the Romans, providing construction material for Paris's buildings. 2. Since they were officially open to the public in 1876, the catacombs have attracted the interest of thousands of visitors and historical figures like King Charles X, who is said to have thrown wild parties there, and Napoleon III. 3. The majority of the network has been off limits since 1955, but even in the area still accessible to tourists are fascinating remnants of Paris's history. 4. They were used by the French resistance to hide from Nazis in World War II, and ironically by the Nazis to build an underground bunker. Here is one of the plans of the catacombs in Paris from the late 1800s, and as you can see, the extensive underground network of tunnels. In Paris, there's even a well-known group called the catacombs. This is an entire group of explorers known for entering the network illegally. The catacombs have been going deep underground into the catacombs for years, hosting everything from bars to movie screenings in the subterranean world. Empire builders. In order to understand the nature of the construction of the tunnels, it's important to look at the early empire builders of Pueblo. The Guggenheim family. The discovery of high-grade silver-lead ore in the Guggenheim mines in Leadville, Colorado in 1881 became the foundation for the Guggenheim fortune in mining. Born and raised in Philadelphia, Daniel Guggenheim was sent to Switzerland as a young man to study the Swiss lace and embroidery business and to serve as a buyer for his father's import firm. The discovery of high-grade silver-lead ore in the Guggenheim mines in Leadville, Colorado, in 1881 became the foundation of the Guggenheim fortune. In 1884, Daniel returned to the U.S. to help manage the family's booming mining and smelting business. Daniel helped to establish the Guggenheim mining and smelting business in Mexico, which by 1895 was earning profits of $1 million a year. In 1891, his father, Meyer Guggenheim, consolidated about a dozen of the family's mining operations into the Colorado Smelting and Refining Company. The Guggenheim family then entered a lengthy struggle with the American Smelting and Refining Company, ASARCO, backed by the Rockefeller family. By 1901, the Guggenheims had acquired control of ASARCO and became the dominant force in the mining industry for the next 3 decades. Daniel was named chairman of the board of ASARCO and directed the trust until 1919. Following his father's death in 1905, Daniel assumed control of the Guggenheim family enterprises. Through ASARCO, Kennecott Copper, and other family-owned companies, the Guggenheims mined tin in Bolivia, gold in the Yukon, diamonds and rubber in the Belgian Congo, diamonds in Angola, and copper in Alaska, Utah, and Chile. Daniel Guggenheim's business policies affected entire nations. It was said that Daniel could make or break a government with a telegram. His biographer, John H. Davis, wrote, "Daniel was power-hungry and tenacious. He suffered repeatedly with stomach ulcers and hypertension." The Guggenheim family amassed enormous wealth through their mining enterprises. By 1918, the family fortune was estimated at $250 million to $300 million, making them among the richest people in the world. Benjamin Guggenheim, the fifth of 7 sons, tragically died on the Titanic while traveling with his French mistress. The Rockefellers played an important role as empire builders in Pueblo. The newly consolidated company of CF&I was controlled by John Osgood until 1903. An expensive modernization campaign left the company drained of financial resources. John D. Rockefeller Sr. took advantage of CF&I's desperate cash needs and took control of the company. The Rockefellers remained the controlling interest in CF&I until the 1940s. Many Puebloans are familiar with the main gate tunnels located at CF&I, Colorado Fuel and Iron, now at the Steelworks Park. These tunnels were used daily by workers who would travel from the west side of I-25 underground to the actual plant. William Martin Aiken is responsible for the design of the historic Federal Building located at 5th and Main in downtown Pueblo, an extension of the downtown tunnel network. Aiken was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and educated at the University of the South. Aiken was appointed as supervising architect of the United States Treasury and sworn in on April 1, 1895. During his short tenure, he oversaw the design of many notable federal buildings, such as the Denver and Philadelphia Mints. Prior to designing the historic Federal Building at 5th and Main, Aiken traveled the world, and many of his drawings were the inspiration for the historic Federal Building. He spent a great deal of time in the city of Venice, and the Doge Palace design is the inspiration behind many of the external features of the historic Federal Building. He later went on to build the Federal Office Building in New York City, the Pueblo Federal Building, the Federal Courthouse and Post Office in Mankato, Minnesota, the Allegheny Post Office in Pittsburgh, the Customs House Museum and Cultural Center in Clarksville, Tennessee. After working in the city of Pueblo, he went on to become the lead architect for the city of Manhattan in New York. There, he was famous for his East 23rd Street bathhouse, which he did with Arnold W. Bruner in 1907. Tragically, he died on an operating table at the age of 53. The Norwegian architect Hans-Peter Henschen began the design of the Knuckles Packing Company and the Rational Factory in 1915. Groundbreaking was in March of 1916, and this particular structure took 1 year to build, finishing in the spring of 1917. With over 250,000 square feet above ground, the meatpacking plant has an extensive network of tunnels underground, serving as areas for service and also for access. Banks, brothels, and bars. Oh my! Throughout the development of the American West, prostitution grew and flourished within the mining camps, small towns, and cities of the 19th century Rocky Mountains. Whether escaping a bad home life, lured by false advertising, or seeking to subsidize their income, thousands of women chose or were forced to enter an industry where they faced segregation and persecution, fines and jailing, and battled the hazards of disease, drug addiction, physical abuse, pregnancy, and abortion. They dreamed of escape through marriage or retirement, but more often, relief only in death. An integral part of Western history, the stories of these women continue to fascinate readers and captivate the minds of historians today. Expanding on the research she did for Brothels, Bordellos, and Bad Girls, University of New Mexico Press, historian Jan McKell moves beyond the mining towns of Colorado to explore the history of prostitution in the Rocky Mountain states of Arizona, Idaho, Montana, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. Each state had its share of working girls and madames, like Big Nose Kate or Calamity Jane, who remain celebrities in the annals of history. But McKell also includes the stories of lesser-known women whose roles in this illicit trade nonetheless shaped our understanding of the American West. In Pueblo, many of the great houses were actually owned by women. Arthur's Castle, one of the most famous of the brothels in Pueblo, started in 1887 and continued until 1976. Alcohol prohibition in Colorado from 1916 to 1933 was a progressive era experiment based on reform-minded and religious sentiments to completely ban the sale and transport of alcohol. While the intention of reformers was to reduce violence, drunkenness, and crime, outlawing alcohol instead created more issues than had been anticipated. Prohibition in Colorado predated national prohibition by 4 years and ended only months before national prohibition was also repealed. As it was elsewhere, the Prohibition era in Colorado was marked by a sharp increase in organized crime, public flouting of laws, black markets, law enforcement and government corruption, and a growing distrust of progressive politics. Despite the failure of Prohibition as a movement, it introduced the state to new social and economic opportunities for women and fundamentally changed the way the public drank alcohol. In Pueblo in particular, with immigrants from all over the world, it was very difficult to convince a community of blue-collar workers to not drink. Therefore, many of the drinking establishments and drinking opportunities and speakeasies went underground. Hence, some of the existing hollow sidewalks and tunnels became an interesting network for prohibition avoiders. To understand Pueblo's underground, we have to look at the unique nature of the hollow sidewalks. Pueblo in the 1800s began its very first urban development, but it really wasn't until the early 1900s when Pueblo came through during its second round of development and really created what we call the hollow sidewalks. They took on many different forms, but their functions were mainly one as storage rooms. It was convenient for drop and transfer from the street level down to lower areas. And of course, during Prohibition, very convenient for bootlegging. So Sugar Moon, which of course was made using beets, and then Leadville Moon, which the tradition goes that in addition to all of the ingredients, they would take overalls from the workers in the mines and swoosh it into to give it its rather visceral taste. Also, we have the Blind Tigers, which of course was one of Pueblo's great speakeasies. We should also point out that the speakeasies had really very powerful rules. For example, no credit, pay in advance. Mind the barkeep, his word is law. No sleeping at the tables, talking politics or religion. In case of raids, down your drink post haste. Do not talk in a loud tone. Speak easy. Secret knocks and passwords will be changed frequently. Check all weapons with the doorman. No limit on drinks if you can hold your liquor. Any fighting will result in being permanently barred. All drunkards will be harshly dealt with by management. Do not leave establishment with liquor. Remember, this is a dry country. Hiding hooch, the origins of bootlegging? Hooch, which is referred to as a cheap whiskey in 1897, is a shortened version of the word hoochinu, which is from 1877, which was a liquor made by Alaskan Indians. The name was derived from a native tribe in Alaska whose distilled liquor was a favorite with miners in 1898 during the Klondike Gold Rush. Here we can see several examples of how women hid their hooch. During Prohibition, people became very creative. Here's an example of the cow shoe, which has several areas where hooch could be hidden. A story circulated about Edward, the Prince of Wales, during his 1919 visit to Canada and the problem of Americans had in obtaining liquor. The prince recalled this ditty at a Canadian town bordering the United States. 24 Yankees, feeling very dry, went across the border to get a drink of rye. When the rye was opened, the Yanks began to sing, God bless America, but God save the King. 4,000 people, 4 nights, a tunnel legacy. In 2016, the Ghost Walk organizers asked me if I would open up the tunnels below the historic Tut building located at Central Plaza. For years, I said no, but on my last occasion, just before leaving and moving from the structure, I decided to open up the tunnels as part of the Ghost Walk. I made it clear that we needed to have groups no larger than 20 and that I should probably be the first stop in the Ghost Walk because up until this particular time in 2016, the Ghost Walk had never entered a building. All of the performances and all of the storytelling took place in front of a building. Well, to my surprise and to great joy, over 4,000 people came in just 4 nights of the Ghost Walk, and the groups ranged from 20 to 80 people in size. But it did not matter whether you were 5 or 95. The fascination with the tunnels was extraordinary. For many, the urban fiction about the tunnels became rather real. I could hear in the background people in their elderly years saying, "I remember when we played here as children," and 5-year-olds, of course, all looking for another tunnel to explore. So let's look at perhaps what some other cities have done with their existing undergrounds. The Seattle Underground. Bill Spidell, an ardent preservationist in the 1950s and 60s, was one of a group of visionaries who saved Pioneer Square by mounting a citizen campaign to convince the city to designate downtown's oldest neighborhood and historic district, thus sparing from the wrecking ball the largest collection of Victorian Romanesque buildings in the United States. While they were in the midst of the restoration and renovations, they discovered a complete network of underground tunnels. The Underground Tour, which Spidell founded in 1965, is a byproduct of that campaign and serves as an excellent example for other cities to consider when utilizing existing infrastructure for adaptive reuse. You've probably noticed how I have not identified many of the locations of the tunnels, and this is on purpose. There is an issue with safety and security, and also the tunnels fall in somewhat of a gray zone. For issues of liability, is the tunnel the responsibility of the owners, or is it the responsibility of the city, or both? This is an unknown variable, and hopefully in the future, we'll be able to take advantage of many of these underground assets as part of Pueblo's great underground. Thank you for listening to the Tunnels of Pueblo. My name is Gregory Howell.